I could feel their eyes on me. All of them. The ballroom of the Palazzo Nero wasn't supposed to exist. Not officially, not in any city registry or tax document. Yet here it stood, 3 stories beneath Milan's oldest cathedral, its vaulted ceilings dripping with crystal chandeliers that cost more than most people earned in a lifetime. The air smelled of cigar smoke, aged whiskey, and something darker I couldn't name. Desperation, maybe. Or blood. I moved through the crowd with my tray held high, silver champagne flutes balanced with the precision I'd learned from 3 years of serving drunk rich people who never looked me in the eye. Tonight was different, though. Tonight, every man in this room looked. They stared at the servers like we were part of the auction catalog, items to be appraised and discarded. Champagne? I offered to a woman draped in emeralds, her bored expression never shifting as she plucked a glass from my tray without a word of thanks. The auction hadn't started yet. Around me, Italy's criminal elite mingled in their €1,000 suits and blood-red dresses, discussing antiquities the way normal people discuss the weather. A stolen Caravaggio here, a looted Egyptian sarcophagus there. I'd been hired for tonight through an agency that specialized in discretion. Servers who knew not to ask questions, not to remember faces, not to exist beyond refilling drinks and clearing plates. I needed the money. God, I needed the money. My phone buzzed in the pocket of my regulation black dress. I already knew what it said. The same thing it had said every day for the past 6 months. Payment overdue. Interest accruing. You have 48 hours. The loan sharks who'd inherited my father's gambling debts when he died didn't care that I was 22 and working 3 jobs. They didn't care that I'd been 17 when he put my name on the papers, too young to understand what I was signing. All they cared about was their money and the increasingly explicit threats about what they'd do to collect if I didn't pay. Another round for table 7, Marco, the head server, hissed as he passed. His face was pale, nervous. He'd warned us before we came down here. Don't speak unless spoken to. Don't look anyone directly in the eye. Don't make mistakes. The people in this room didn't tolerate mistakes. I wove through the crowd toward table 7, tucked in the far corner beneath a tapestry depicting some medieval battle. 3 men sat there, their conversation pausing as I approached. I kept my eyes down, professional smile fixed in place. Gentlemen, can I offer you? A hand shot out and grabbed my wrist. Hard. I gasped, the tray tilting dangerously. Champagne sloshed but didn't spill. Years of practice keeping my hands steady even as my heart lurched into my throat. Well. The voice was slurred, thick with alcohol and entitlement. What do we have here? I looked up to find a man in his 50s leering at me, his grip on my wrist tightening until I could feel my pulse hammering against his fingers. His face was flushed, sweat beading on his forehead despite the room's careful climate control. I recognized the look in his eyes. I'd seen it before, in back alleys and parking lots, in the faces of men who thought they could take whatever they wanted. Sir, please let go. I kept my voice level, professional. I need to serve a beauty like this, he interrupted, yanking me closer until I stumbled against the table's edge. Should be in the catalog tonight. How much for an hour with her, eh? He looked at his companions, who shifted uncomfortably, but said nothing. Cowards. All of them. My free hand tightened on the tray. I could smash it into his face, grab one of the champagne flutes, and drive it into his wandering other hand that had started creeping up my arm. But then what? Marco had been clear. Cause a scene, lose the job, get blacklisted from every agency in the city. And I needed this money. Remove your hand. The voice cut through the ballroom like a blade through silk. Everyone heard it. Conversations died mid-sentence. The string quartet in the corner faltered, their bows going still. The drunk man's grip loosened slightly. I looked up to find the crowd parting, and through that gap walked someone I'd only glimpsed earlier in the evening, a man who moved like violence wrapped in a bespoke suit. Luca Demir. I knew the name because everyone here knew the name, whispered it like a curse or a prayer depending on whether you owed him money or favors. He controlled the black market antiquities trade across 3 continents, they said. He'd killed his first man at 19. He answered to no one, feared nothing, and destroyed anyone foolish enough to cross him. He was also, objectively, the most striking man I'd ever seen. Tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair that fell just slightly too long to be respectable, and eyes the color of smoke before a fire. His suit was charcoal gray, tailored so perfectly it must have been sewn onto his body. The top 4 buttons of his white shirt undone to reveal a triangle of olive skin and the edge of what looked like a scar. He wore no tie, no jewelry except a watch that probably cost more than my accumulated debt. He didn't need accessories. His presence was enough. Those smoke-gray eyes fixed on the man still gripping my wrist. I said, Luca repeated, his voice dangerously soft. Remove your hand. The drunk man's face went from flushed to pale. Demir, I was just... The sound of breaking bone was surprisingly loud in the hushed ballroom. I didn't even see Luca move. One moment he was 3 feet away. The next his hand was wrapped around the drunk man's fingers, crushing them with methodical precision. The man screamed, releasing me immediately, but Luca didn't let go. He kept squeezing until I heard another crack, then another. When you touch what belongs to me, Luca said, his tone conversational despite the violence of his actions, you forfeit the privilege of having hands. I'm sorry. The man was sobbing now, trying to pull away. I didn't know she was yours, I swear, I didn't... She wasn't. Luca's gaze shifted to me, and I felt the impact of those eyes like a physical touch. Until now. He released the man's ruined hand, letting him collapse back into his chair, cradling his mangled fingers and whimpering. Then Luca reached for me, one arm sliding around my waist with casual possessiveness, pulling me against his side. I could feel the heat of him through the thin fabric of my dress, the solid muscle beneath his suit jacket, the barely controlled violence thrumming through his frame. This beauty, he announced to the room, his voice carrying to every corner of the ballroom, is mine. And then he kissed me, not gently, not asking permission. His mouth claimed mine with brutal certainty, one hand tangling in my hair and tilting my head back at an angle that made stars burst behind my closed eyelids. The kiss was possessive, demanding, a public claiming that left no room for doubt or negotiation. His tongue swept against mine, and I tasted whiskey and something darker, more dangerous. I should have fought, should have pulled away, slapped him, screamed. But my body betrayed me, melting against his solid warmth even as my mind screamed warnings. The tray slipped from my nerveless fingers. Somewhere, someone caught it. I heard the clink of crystal being saved. But I couldn't focus on anything except the man consuming me with this kiss. When he finally pulled back, I was breathing hard, my lips swollen and my legs unsteady. The ballroom was absolutely silent. 100 criminals watched us, their expressions ranging from shock to fear to something that looked almost like pity. Luca's hand remained possessive on my waist. The auction will begin in 10 minutes, he said to the room at large, as if he hadn't just broken a man's hand and kissed a stranger in front of everyone. Anyone who bids on anything I want will meet the same fate as our friend here. He gestured casually at the still sobbing man. Understood? Murmurs of assent rippled through the crowd. They understood. Of course they understood. This was Luca Demir's world, and the rest of them just lived in it. He looked down at me, his expression unreadable. Come with me. It wasn't a question. His hand on my waist became a guiding pressure, steering me through the crowd toward a door I hadn't noticed before. I should have resisted, should have run. But where would I go? Back to my apartment where loan sharks waited. Back to my 3 jobs that barely kept me fed. Back to a life that was already choking me. Besides, I could still feel the imprint of his lips on mine, the way my body had responded despite every logical reason not to. That terrified me more than anything else. We entered a private room, some kind of office with leather furniture and bookshelves lined with what I suspected were priceless first editions. Luca released me, moving to pour himself a drink from a crystal decanter. Sit. I remained standing, wrapping my arms around myself. I need to get back to work. No. He took a sip of his drink, watching me over the rim. You don't. My supervisor has already been compensated for your absence. He set the glass down with a soft click, along with a generous bonus for providing such quality staff tonight. The way he said quality made heat creep up my neck. I lifted my chin, trying to find some shred of dignity. You can't just buy people. Can I? His smile was sharp, predatory. Your name is Isabella Rossini. You're 22 years old. You work at a cafe, a bookstore, and occasionally as event staff through agencies like the one that brought you here tonight. Your father died 6 months ago, leaving you with debts totaling approximately 80,000 euros to some very unpleasant people. You live alone in a studio apartment in the Porta Genova district. You take the tram to work. You eat pasta 4 nights a week because it's cheap. Should I continue? The room tilted slightly. You investigated me? I investigate everyone who enters my spaces. He moved closer, each step deliberate. But you, I noticed the moment you walked in. The way you move, the way you keep your eyes down but miss nothing. The way you're drowning but refuse to ask for help. I don't need help. You need 80,000 euros by Friday, or those loan sharks will sell you to cover the debt. His voice was matter-of-fact, as if he were discussing the weather. I know the men who hold your markers. They specialize in young women with no family, no resources, no options. By this time next week, you'll be in a brothel in Naples if you're lucky. Dubai if you're not. The truth of his words hit me like a fist to the stomach. I'd known, of course, had known for weeks what would happen when I couldn't pay. But hearing it stated so baldly, so certainly, made it real in a way it hadn't been before. What do you want? My voice came out smaller than I intended. Luca reached out, his fingers tracing my jawline with surprising gentleness. I'll clear your debt, all of it. In exchange, you belong to me for 5 years. I jerked back. Belong to you? You'll live in my home, follow my rules, learn what I teach you, be available when I want you. His eyes burned into mine. In exchange, you'll have safety, luxury, and the certainty that no one will ever touch you without your permission. Except me. That's insane. That's business. He withdrew his hand, returning to his drink. You have 5 minutes to decide. After that, the offer expires, and you return to your life. What's left of it? I should have said no. Should have walked out, found another way, sold everything I owned and run somewhere far from Milan and loan sharks and men who thought they could buy people. But I looked at Luca Demir, at the cold certainty in his eyes, the power radiating from every line of his body, and I knew he was offering something no one else could. Survival. A terrible, complicated survival, but survival nonetheless. If I say yes, I heard myself ask, what exactly would you want from me? His smile was slow, dangerous, promising things I wasn't ready to name. Everything, Isabella. I would want everything. And God help me, standing in that room with my lips still burning from his kiss, and my future hanging by a thread. I knew I was going to say yes. I said yes. The words left my mouth before I could fully process what they meant, what I was agreeing to. Luca's expression didn't change. No triumph, no satisfaction. Just a slight nod, as if he'd known all along what my answer would be. "Smart girl," he murmured, pulling out his phone. He typed something quickly, then pocketed it again. "Your debt will be cleared within the hour. I'll have your belongings collected from your apartment tomorrow." Tomorrow? My voice sounded distant, detached. "I start tomorrow." "You started the moment you said yes." He moved closer, his hand cupping my face with a possessiveness that made my breath catch. "From this moment forward, you're mine. No more tram rides. No more pasta 4 nights a week. No more working yourself to exhaustion for people who don't deserve you. You don't even know me." "I know enough." His thumb traced my lower lip, and I hated how my body responded to that simple touch. "I know you're stronger than you think. I know you're desperate enough to make dangerous choices. And I know that kiss affected you as much as it did me." I wanted to deny it, but we both knew it would be a lie. The door opened without a knock. A man entered, tall, broad, with a scar running from his temple to his jaw. He nodded to Luca. "The auction is ready." "Good." Luca's hand dropped from my face. "Take Isabella to the car. Ensure she's comfortable." The scarred man's gaze flickered to me, assessment in his eyes. "Yes, sir." "Wait," I protested. "I can't just leave. My supervisor has been informed you're unwell and had to depart early." Luca interrupted smoothly. "Along with a bonus that ensures he won't ask questions. Everything is handled, Isabella. That's what I do. I handle things." The scarred man, whose name I learned was Dimitri, led me through corridors I hadn't known existed, up a service elevator, and out into the cool Milan night. A car waited, sleek and black, and undoubtedly worth more than my entire life's earnings. Dimitri opened the door. "Ms. Rossini," he said with surprising courtesy. I slid into the leather interior, my mind still struggling to catch up with the past 20 minutes. Dimitri closed the door and took his position in the driver's seat, separated from me by a privacy partition. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Your apartment at Porta Genova. Be ready at 9 a.m. Bring nothing. Everything will be provided." I stared at the message, reality finally crashing over me in waves. I'd just sold myself for 5 years. 5 years of my life, handed over to a man I didn't know, whose reputation was built on violence and control. 5 years of belonging to Luca Demir. The drive took 40 minutes. We left the city center, heading into the hills where Milan's wealthiest kept their estates hidden behind stone walls and armed security. The car finally turned through iron gates that opened automatically, following a long driveway lined with cypress trees. The house, no, the mansion, was a study in old-world elegance meets modern security. Stone walls, arched windows, but also cameras at every angle, reinforced doors, guards patrolling the perimeter. A fortress disguised as a home. Dimitri opened my door. "This way." Inside, the mansion was exactly what I expected, and nothing I was prepared for. Marble floors, vaulted ceilings, artwork that belonged in museums. A woman appeared. 50s, iron gray hair pulled into a severe bun, her expression professionally neutral. "Ms. Rossini, I'm Signora Caruso. I manage Mr. Demir's household." Her eyes swept over my server's uniform with faint disapproval. "Your rooms have been prepared. Please follow me." My rooms turned out to be a suite larger than my entire apartment. Bedroom, sitting room, bathroom with a tub that could fit 3 people. The closet was empty, waiting to be filled. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked gardens lit by subtle ground lights. "Mr. Demir will join you for breakfast at 8, Signora Caruso informed me. Please be dressed appropriately. Clothing has been provided." She gestured to several boxes stacked near the closet. "What's considered appropriate?" I asked, my voice sounding small in the enormous space. "Mr. Demir prefers classic elegance. You'll find suitable options." She moved toward the door, then paused. "A word of advice, Ms. Rossini. Mr. Demir values obedience and discretion above all else. Remember that, and your time here will be manageable." She left, the door closing with a soft click that somehow sounded like a cell door locking. I stood in the center of the room, surrounded by luxury I'd only seen in magazines, and felt the weight of my decision settle onto my shoulders like chains made of silk and gold. A gilded cage was still a cage. My phone buzzed again. Another message from the unknown number. "Sleep well, Isabella. Tomorrow your education begins." I didn't sleep well. I barely slept at all. Instead, I explored my new prison, opening boxes to find clothing in exactly my size, designer labels I recognized from fashion magazines, fabrics that whispered against my skin like water, dresses, slacks, blouses, all in a sophisticated palette of blacks, grays, and deep jewel tones. Shoes lined up in the closet, ranging from practical flats to vertiginous heels. Lingerie in silk and lace, far more expensive and revealing than anything I'd owned. The bathroom was stocked with products I couldn't pronounce, French and Italian labels that cost more per bottle than my monthly grocery budget. The towels were so soft they felt like clouds. I took a bath at 3 a.m, sinking into water that smelled of lavender and something else. Rosemary, maybe. The tub had jets. There was a television embedded in the wall. This bathroom was nicer than any home I'd ever lived in, and I hated how much I didn't hate it. At 7:30, I forced myself out of bed and into the shower, then stood in front of the closet trying to decide what appropriately dressed meant. I settled on black slacks and a cream silk blouse, leaving my hair down because I had no idea what else to do with it. Minimal makeup. I'd never been good at that anyway. At precisely 8 o'clock, there was a knock at my door. "Ms. Rossini, Mr. Demir is waiting." I followed a young man in a crisp suit through the mansion's corridors, trying to memorize the route and failing. We descended a curved staircase, passed through rooms filled with antiques and art, and finally entered a sunlit dining room overlooking the gardens. Luca sat at the head of a table that could seat 20, reading a newspaper and drinking espresso. He looked up as I entered, and those smoke-gray eyes swept over me with an intensity that made me want to check if my blouse was buttoned correctly. "Good morning, Isabella." He gestured to the chair on his right. "Sit." I sat, hyper-aware of how close that put me to him. The table was laden with breakfast, fresh bread, pastries, fruit, cheeses, cold cuts. Enough food to feed 10 people. "Coffee or tea?" he asked, his tone conversational as if this were completely normal. "Coffee, please." He poured it himself, adding cream and sugar without asking how I took it. When he slid the cup across to me, it was exactly right. The same way I'd made my coffee every morning for years. "You've been very thorough," I said quietly. "I'm always thorough." He set the newspaper aside, giving me his full attention. "Now, let's discuss the rules." My hand tightened on the coffee cup. "Rules? You agreed to belong to me for 5 years. That comes with expectations." He leaned back in his chair, completely at ease. "First, you don't leave the estate without permission. Second, you don't contact anyone from your previous life without approval. Third, you follow instructions without question or argument. Fourth, what happens in this house stays in this house. You discuss nothing with outsiders." Each rule felt like another bar on my cage. "And if I break these rules?" "Consequences." The word was soft, almost gentle. "I'm not a cruel man, Isabella, but I am an exacting one. Disobedience will be punished. The severity depends on the transgression." What kind of punishment? My voice was steadier than I felt. Isolation, loss of privileges, physical discipline if necessary, though I prefer not to resort to that. His gaze held mine. But reward loyalty and obedience generously. You'll find I can be very generous to those who please me. The implication in those words made heat crawl up my neck. And what exactly are my responsibilities? What do you want me to do? Lucas smiled, and it was the smile of a man who held all the cards and knew it. You're going to learn a very specific skill set, Isabella. Ideal in antiquities, rare books, historical documents, artifacts that museums would kill to possess. But the most valuable items are often the most scrutinized. Authentication is everything in my business. I don't know anything about authentication. You will. He poured himself more espresso. You're going to become an expert in historical document forgery. The finest forger in Europe if you apply yourself. I have the teachers, the resources, the materials. All you need to provide is dedication and talent. I stared at him, trying to process this. You want me to be a criminal. I want you to be useful, he corrected. Your other option was being sold to a brothel. This seems preferable, don't you think? The brutal honesty stung because it was true. And at night, I forced myself to ask. You said I'd be available when you wanted me. What does that mean? His eyes darkened, and he reached out to trail his fingers along my wrist. A deliberate echo of how the drunk man had grabbed me last night. But Luca's touch was different. Controlled. Possessive without being violent. It means, he said softly, that when I want you in my bed, you'll come. When I want to touch you, you'll let me. When I want to claim every inch of you, you'll submit. His thumb pressed against my pulse point. But I'm not a rapist, Isabella. I won't force you. I'll seduce you until you beg me to take you. My breath caught. That's not going to happen. We'll see. He released my wrist and stood. Eat. Your first lesson begins in an hour. Dmitri will show you to the workshop. He left, and I sat alone at the enormous table, surrounded by food I was too anxious to eat, in a mansion I couldn't leave, bound to a man I barely knew for 5 years. I had escaped the loan sharks. I had escaped being sold to a brothel. But I was beginning to understand that I'd simply traded one kind of captivity for another. The workshop was in the east wing, a large room filled with tables covered in documents, magnifying glasses, chemical solutions, and tools I couldn't name. An elderly man waited there, wire-rimmed glasses, ink-stained fingers, patient eyes. Ms. Rossini, I'm Professor Alessi. Mr. Demir has asked me to teach you the art of historical document replication. He gestured to a chair. Shall we begin? And so my education started. Professor Alessi was a patient teacher, walking me through the basics of paper analysis, ink composition, aging techniques. The work was meticulous, demanding absolute attention to detail. Hours passed without me noticing, lost in learning how to identify paper types by touch, how to mix inks that would pass ultraviolet analysis, how to replicate handwriting from centuries past. I was good at it. Surprisingly good. You have steady hands, Professor Alessi observed, as I practiced a 16th century Italian script. And an eye for detail. These are gifts, Ms. Rossini. Rare gifts. By the time Dmitri appeared to escort me back to my rooms, my fingers were cramped and my eyes burned. But I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Purpose. Dinner was delivered to my room, more food than I could eat, beautifully prepared. I ate alone, grateful for the solitude to process everything. At 9 o'clock, there was a knock at my door. I opened it to find Luca standing there. Changed from his morning suit into dark slacks and a white shirt with the sleeves rolled up. The top buttons were undone, revealing that triangle of skin I'd noticed last night. Walk with me, he said. It wasn't a question, but I asked anyway. Where? The gardens. I thought you might like some air. He was right. I'd been inside all day, and the thought of open space was suddenly appealing. I followed him through the mansion and out onto a terrace that overlooked formal gardens lit by moonlight and subtle landscape lighting. We walked in silence for several minutes. The only sounds are footsteps on gravel paths and the distant splash of a fountain. How was your first lesson? Luca asked eventually. Interesting. Professor Alessi is a good teacher. He's the best, and he says you're a natural. Luca glanced at me. That pleases me. I'm glad I can be useful, I said, unable to keep the edge from my voice. He stopped walking, turning to face me. You're angry. I'm adjusting. To captivity. His tone was almost amused. You'll grow accustomed to it. The cage is comfortable after all. A cage is still a cage, no matter how gilded. True. He reached out, his fingers tangling in my hair with that same casual possessiveness. But consider the alternative. This time last night, you were serving drinks to men who saw you as meat. Now you're learning a craft, sleeping in silk sheets, eating food prepared by a Michelin-trained chef. Is this really so terrible? I wanted to say yes. Wanted to rail against the loss of freedom, the rules, the way he touched me like he owned me. But the truth was more complicated. I don't know yet, I admitted. His smile was approving. Honest, I like that. His hand tightened in my hair, tilting my head back. I'm going to kiss you again, Isabella. Why are you telling me? Because I want you to know it's coming. I want you to have time to anticipate it, to feel your body respond, even though your mind says you shouldn't want this. He leaned closer, his breath warm against my lips. I want you to understand that I see every reaction, every tremor, every betrayal of desire your body can't hide. And then he kissed me, slower than last night but no less consuming. His mouth moved against mine with deliberate skill, coaxing a response I tried desperately not to give. But my body betrayed me again, melting into him, my hands somehow finding their way to his chest, where I could feel his heartbeat steady and strong beneath my palms. When he pulled back, we were both breathing harder. 5 years, Isabella, he murmured against my lips. By the time your contract ends, you'll be mine in every way that matters. And the beautiful thing? You'll wanna be. He released me and walked back toward the mansion, leaving me standing alone in the moonlit garden, my lips burning and my heart racing, and the terrible knowledge settling in my chest that he might be right. 3 months passed in a strange rhythm of captivity and luxury. My days followed a pattern that became almost comfortable in its predictability. Mornings with Professor Alessi in the workshop, learning the intricate art of forgery, how to age paper with tea and sunlight, how to crack pigments the way they would have been prepared in the 16th century, how to replicate the pressure and flow of quill pens that hadn't been used in hundreds of years. Afternoons studying art history, chemistry, linguistics. I learned to read Latin, to identify Renaissance binding techniques, to spot the microscopic tells that separated authentic documents from clever fakes. I was good at it. Better than good. Professor Alessi said I had a gift, that my hands seemed to remember techniques I'd never been taught. Within 6 weeks, I'd successfully replicated a letter, supposedly written by Lucrezia Borgia, that fooled even the professor on first inspection. Luca came to the workshop sometimes, watching me work with those unreadable smoke-gray eyes. He never interrupted, never offered praise or criticism, just observed in silence that made me hyper-aware of every movement, every breath. The nights were different. Luca was true to his word. He didn't force me, but he seduced me with the patience of a man who had all the time in the world and knew exactly how the game would end. Dinners in the formal dining room where we sat close enough that I could feel the heat of him. Walks in the garden where his hand would find the small of my back, burning through the silk of my dress. Conversations in his study where he'd pour expensive wine and we'd discuss art, history, philosophy, and I'd find myself forgetting that I was his captive, his property, his project. And the kisses. God, the kisses. He kissed me every night before I retreated to my rooms. Sometimes gentle, almost tender. Sometimes demanding, possessive, leaving me breathless and aching. He learned my body's responses better than I knew them myself. Where to touch to make me gasp. How to angle his mouth to make my knees weak. Exactly how long to draw it out before pulling away and leaving me wanting more. Not yet, he'd murmur against my lips when my hands clutched at his shirt, when my body pressed against his seeking more. When you come to me, Isabella, it will be because you can't bear not to. Because you've stopped fighting what we both know you want. I hated that he was right. Hated how my body responded to him. How I started anticipating our evening walks. How I'd catch myself watching him during dinner and wondering what his hands would feel like on skin, instead of just through clothing. The isolation didn't help. I had no contact with my former life. My phone had been replaced with one that only called numbers Luca approved. I had no internet access except through a monitored computer in the library. Signora Caruso was professional but distant. Professor Alessi was kind, but focused only on our lessons. Dimitri and the other guards were polite ghosts. My only real human connection was Luca. And he knew it. Of course he knew it. He'd designed it that way. One evening in late spring, 4 months into my captivity, Luca invited me to his private study after dinner. It was a room I'd only glimpsed before. Rich wood paneling, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, a massive desk that looked like it belonged to a Renaissance prince. "Sit," he said, gesturing to a leather chair near the fireplace where a small fire burned despite the warm evening. I sat, accepting the glass of wine he offered. He settled into the chair across from me, close enough that our knees almost touched. "Professor Alessi tells me you're ready for your first real project," Luca said, swirling his wine. "A letter from Machiavelli to Lorenzo de' Medici, discussing political strategy. There's a buyer in London who will pay €500,000 for authenticated correspondence from that period." "500,000?" I tried to keep the shock from my voice. "More if the content is particularly interesting." His eyes gleamed in the firelight. "You'll create the letter. I'll provide the historical context, the appropriate content. You'll handle the physical replication. If it passes inspection, we split the profit." "Split?" I repeated. "I thought I belonged to you. Why would you share the money?" "Because I reward excellence, Isabella. 20% of every successful piece you create goes into an account in your name. At the end of 5 years, you'll walk away with significant wealth. Enough to start over anywhere in the world." The offer was generous. Suspiciously generous. "What's the catch?" "No catch. Just incentive." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, bringing him close enough that I could smell his cologne. Something woodsy and expensive. "I want you invested in the work. I want you to care about the quality, the authenticity. Fear makes people sloppy. Motivation makes them brilliant. And if I fail? If the forgery is discovered?" His expression darkened. "Then we both have a problem. My reputation in this business is built on providing undetectable quality. If you produce work that can be traced back to me, there will be consequences." The threat hung in the air between us. What kind of consequences? The kind that remind you why obedience matters. He reached out, his fingers trailing along my jaw. "But you won't fail, Isabella. You're too talented, too careful, and you're too smart to disappoint me." His touch made it hard to think clearly. I pulled back slightly, needing space. "Why me? You could have hired an experienced forger, someone who already knew what they were doing." "I could have," he agreed. "But experienced forgers have reputations, histories, connections. They can be traced. You were a blank slate, no criminal record, no association with the art world, no reason for anyone to suspect you. And you had the raw talent I needed, the steady hands, the eye for detail. His smile was sharp. Plus, you were desperate. Desperation makes people pliable. The clinical assessment of how he'd chosen me, how he'd identified me as the perfect tool for his purposes, should have angered me. Instead, I felt a strange sort of clarity. At least he was honest about what I was to him. When do I start? Tomorrow. Professor Alessi will provide the materials. I'll give you the historical briefing tonight. He stood, moving to his desk and retrieving a leather folder. The letter should reference specific events from 1513, use appropriate language and rhetorical style, and contain political advice that would be valuable, but not so inflammatory that it would have been widely circulated or preserved. He handed me the folder. Inside were pages of notes, historical references, samples of Machiavelli's actual handwriting from authenticated letters. Study this tonight. Questions can wait until morning. He moved behind my chair, his hands coming to rest on my shoulders. You're going to be brilliant at this, Isabella. I can feel it. His touch made my skin burn even through the silk of my blouse. I wanted to lean into it and pull away in equal measure. Why do you do this? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. The touching, the kissing, the seduction. If you wanted to force me, you could. You have the power. Why do you wait? His hands tightened slightly on my shoulders. Because force is crude. Any man with strength can take what he wants. But seduction, true seduction, is an art. Making someone desire the cage, crave the chains, beg for the very captivity they should resist, that requires skill, patience, understanding. He leaned down, his lips brushing my ear. I don't want your body, Isabella. I can buy bodies anywhere. I want your submission. Freely given, desperately offered, impossible to take back. And I'll have it, eventually. You already know I will. His breath against my skin made me shiver. He noticed, of course. Luca noticed everything. Go, he murmured. Study the materials. Rest. Tomorrow you begin proving your worth. I left his study on unsteady legs, the leather folder clutched to my chest like a shield that couldn't protect me from anything. That night, I dreamed of quill pens and sealing wax, of Luca's hands on my skin, of cages made of silk and desire that locked from the inside. The Machiavelli letter took me 3 weeks to perfect. 3 weeks of obsessive attention to detail. Aging the paper to exactly the right shade of yellow-brown, mixing ink from period-appropriate ingredients, practicing the handwriting until I could replicate it without conscious thought. Professor Alessi guided me, but the work was mine. When I finally placed the completed letter on Luca's desk, I felt something close to pride. He examined it under a magnifying glass, then under UV light, then held it up to study the watermark in the paper. Minutes passed in silence while my heart hammered against my ribs. Finally he looked up, and something that might have been approval flickered in his eyes. Exceptional, he said softly. Even knowing it's a forgery, I can't find a single tell. The aging is perfect. The ink composition is correct. The handwriting is flawless. He set it down carefully. You've exceeded my expectations, Isabella. And the praise shouldn't have mattered. Shouldn't have made warmth bloom in my chest. But it did. The buyer has already wired the deposit, Luca continued. €500,000, as promised. 100,000 of that is yours. 100,000 euros. More money than I'd ever imagined having. Enough to pay off my father's debts 10 times over. I don't have access to that account, I said. You will, when your 5 years are complete. He stood, moving around the desk toward me. But for now, this deserves a more immediate reward. He pulled me against him with sudden force, one hand tangling in my hair, the other splayed possessively across my lower back. The kiss was different from the others, hungrier, more demanding, carrying an edge of triumph. When he pulled back, we were both breathing hard. "You're mine, Isabella," he murmured against my lips. "My creation, my tool, my treasure. And you're becoming exactly what I knew you could be." The words should have felt like a brand. Instead, they felt like belonging. And that terrified me more than anything else. I turned 23 in August, 6 months into my captivity. I didn't mention it to anyone. What was the point? But Luca knew, of course. He knew everything about me, had known my birthday before I'd ever set foot in his mansion. That morning, I woke to find a small velvet box on my nightstand. Inside was a necklace, delicate gold chain, a pendant in the shape of a quill pen, tiny diamonds set along its length. Beautiful, personal, a reminder of what I'd become for him. I wore it to breakfast without being asked. Luca's smile when he saw it made something twist in my chest. "It suits you," he said, reaching across the table to adjust how it lay against my collarbone. His fingers lingered on my skin. 23. Still so young, yet already so accomplished. "Thank you," I murmured, because what else could I say? The past 2 months had been productive. 3 more successful forgeries, a letter from Leonardo da Vinci discussing mechanical engineering, a page from a lost Dante manuscript, a papal decree from the 14th century. Each one had sold for astronomical sums. My account was growing, though I couldn't access it. My skills were sharpening with every project. And Luca's seduction was working. I knew it. Hated it. Couldn't stop it. The isolation had worn down my resistance. The luxury had softened the edges of my anger. The work had given me purpose. And Luca himself, his intelligence, his intensity, the way he looked at me like I was simultaneously a priceless artifact and a puzzle he was determined to solve, had burrowed under my skin in ways I couldn't deny. I still slept in my own rooms, but it was getting harder to close that door each night. Harder to ignore the ache his kisses left behind, the way my body responded to his touch, the growing curiosity about what would happen if I stopped fighting. He knew. God, he knew. "Come with me," he said after breakfast. "I want to show you something." He led me through parts of the mansion I'd never seen before, downstairs into what must have been a wine cellar. But instead of bottles, the temperature-controlled room housed shelves of documents protected in climate-controlled cases. "My private collection," Luca said, gesturing around the room. "Pieces I've acquired over the years that I have no intention of selling. My personal treasury." I moved closer to examine them. Letters from popes and kings, pages from illuminated manuscripts, documents that reshaped historical narratives. Each one worth a fortune, together probably priceless. "Why show me this?" I asked. "Because you've earned my trust." He stood behind me, close enough that I could feel his warmth. "And because I want you to understand what we're building together. Every piece you create becomes part of a larger tapestry, a hidden history that exists alongside the official record." His hand settled on my waist, and I didn't pull away. "You're not just a forger anymore, Isabella. You're an artist, a historian, a keeper of secrets." His lips brushed my neck, sending shivers down my spine. "And you're mine." I turned in his arms, looking up into those smoke-gray eyes, for 5 years. "We'll see." His smile was knowing, dangerous. "You might find you don't want to leave when the time comes." He kissed me there in his treasury, surrounded by stolen history and forged beauty. And I kissed him back with a hunger that should have shamed me but didn't. We were climbing the stairs back to the main house when I felt it. a wave of nausea so intense I had to grab the railing to keep from falling. "Isabella." Luca's hand steadied me. "What's wrong?" "I don't know. I just felt—" Another wave hit, and this time I couldn't fight it. I turned and vomited into a decorative plant at the top of the stairs. Luca pulled my hair back, his touch surprisingly gentle. When the spasms passed, he helped me to a nearby sitting room. "Signora Caruso," he called, his voice sharp with command. "Get Dr. Marchesi. Now." "I'm fine," I protested weakly. Probably just something I ate. But even as I said it, my mind was racing backward. When was my last period? I'd been irregular since the stress of my father's death, but it had been. 8 weeks? 9? No, that wasn't possible. Dr. Marchesi arrived within the hour, a discreet physician who clearly asked no questions about the nature of Luca's household. He examined me in my rooms while Luca paced outside like a caged animal. "Ms. Rossini," the doctor said gently, "when was your last menstrual period?" My hands went instinctively to my stomach. I'm not sure. 2 months, maybe? He performed a quick examination, then took a blood sample. "I'll have the results within a few hours, but based on your symptoms and history, I believe you're pregnant. Approximately 8 to 10 weeks along." The room tilted. Pregnant. With Luca's child. We'd never had sex. He'd kept his word about that, hadn't forced me. But the kisses had become more heated over the months, the touching more intimate. And one night, 3 months ago, after too much wine and the intoxicating high of completing a particularly difficult forgery, we'd come so close. His hands under my dress, my hands fumbling with his belt, desperate friction and need, and we'd stopped. He'd pulled back at the last moment, both of us breathing hard, and said, "Not like this. Not when you're drunk on success and wine. When I take you, Isabella, you'll be sober and certain." But we'd been reckless. Too close, too heated, and apparently close enough. When Dr. Marchesi left, Luca entered my rooms. His expression was unreadable as he sat on the edge of my bed. "Pregnant," he said, the word flat. "He's not certain yet. The blood test, he's certain." Luca's hand found my stomach, resting there with careful possession. "My child, growing inside you." "This changes the contract," I said, trying to find solid ground. "I can't. This changes nothing." His eyes met mine, fierce and certain. "Except that now you're even more mine than before. The mother of my heir. The woman carrying my bloodline. I didn't agree to this. Having a baby wasn't part of our deal. Life rarely asks for agreement, Isabella." His hand pressed more firmly against my stomach, "But this child will be protected, cherished, given every advantage. And so will you, if you're smart enough to accept it." I should have been angry, should have demanded he let me go, find some way to escape this cage that was now closing even tighter. But all I felt was a strange, terrifying certainty that Luca was right. This changed everything, and nothing. I was still his. Now, perhaps, forever. The blood test confirmed it. 8.5 weeks pregnant, due in early April. Dr. Marchesi prescribed vitamins and rest, warning me that stress could affect the pregnancy. Luca became even more controlling. No more wine with dinner, no more late nights in the workshop. Professor Alessi's lessons were shortened to 4 hours a day. My diet was monitored by Signora Caruso. I was forbidden from lifting anything heavy, from walking too far in the gardens, from doing anything that might put the pregnancy at risk. "You're being ridiculous," I protested one evening. "I'm pregnant, not dying." "You're carrying my child," Luca countered, his voice brooking no argument. "Every precaution will be taken." The possessiveness should have felt suffocating. Instead, It felt like being wrapped in armor. Restrictive, yes, but also protective. 3 weeks after the diagnosis, I woke in the middle of the night with an idea burning in my mind. A way out. A chance at freedom before the baby made escape impossible. Dmitri had left his tablet in the library that afternoon. I'd seen him set it down, distracted by a phone call. If I could access it, I could send a message to someone. Anyone. Father Thomas at the church near my old apartment. He'd help me, find me somewhere to go. It was a desperate plan, probably futile. But it was a chance. I waited until the house was silent, then slipped from my rooms. The library was dark, shadows pooling in corners. The tablet sat where Dmitri had left it, its screen glowing faintly. I'd just unlocked it when the lights blazed on. Luca stood in the doorway, fully dressed despite the late hour. Behind him, Dmitri looked apologetic and grim. Isabella. Luca's voice was dangerously soft. What are you doing? My mouth went dry. I couldn't sleep. I came to find a book. Lying to me is not wise. He moved closer, each step measured. Dmitri left that tablet there on my instruction. A test. I wondered if you were truly settled here, or if you were still looking for escape. He'd set a trap, and I'd walked right into it. You can't keep me here forever, I said, lifting my chin despite the fear clawing at my throat. I'm not your property. Yes, you are. He was close now, towering over me. By contract, by circumstance, and now by biology. His hand found my stomach again, that possessive touch that made me feel claimed in ways I couldn't fight. You're carrying my child, Isabella. Did you really think I'd let you run? I can't do this. I can't be locked away, controlled, treated like a possession. You're not a possession. His voice dropped, became almost gentle. You're far more valuable than that. You're mine, Isabella. Mine to protect, to cherish, to keep safe from a world that would destroy you. You're destroying me, I whispered. Something flashed in his eyes. Pain, maybe, or recognition. No, I'm remaking you. And you're fighting it because you're afraid of what you'll become. Who you'll become. He was right. God help me. He was right. I was changing, molding into something new under his hands. And the most terrifying part was that some piece of me wanted it. What happens now? I asked. Punishment for trying to escape? Isolation, he said simply. 1 week in your rooms. Meals delivered, but no visitors. No lessons, no walks, no human contact except necessary medical care. His hand cupped my face. I need you to understand that defiance has consequences, Isabella. Even when you're carrying my child. 1 week alone. It didn't sound terrible until I remembered how much the isolation had worn me down already. How Luca had become my only real connection to another human being. Please, I heard myself say. Don't leave me alone. His smile was sad. You should have thought of that before you betrayed my trust. He left, taking Dmitri with him. The door to my suite locked from the outside, and for 7 days, I saw no one. The isolation nearly broke me. 7 days alone with nothing but my thoughts, my growing belly, and the suffocating realization of how completely I'd become dependent on Luca. Meals appeared through a slot in the door, perfectly prepared, nutritionally balanced, utterly joyless. Dr. Marchesi came once to check on the baby, his examination conducted in professional silence before he left without meeting my eyes. No one spoke to me. No one looked at me. I was a ghost in my gilded cage. By day 3, I was talking to myself just to hear a human voice. By day 5, I was crying at random intervals, overwhelmed by hormones and loneliness and the crushing weight of my circumstances. By day 7, when the lock finally clicked and the door opened, I was ready to promise Luca anything just to not be alone anymore. He stood in the doorway, perfectly composed in dark slacks and a white shirt, studying me with those unreadable smoke-gray eyes. "Have you learned your lesson?" he asked quietly. I nodded, not trusting my voice. He entered, closing the door behind him. "Tell me what you've learned, Isabella." "That I can't escape." The words tasted like ash. "That I'm trapped here." "No." He moved closer, his hand cupping my face with surprising gentleness. "You've learned that you don't want to be alone, that you need me as much as I need you, that we're bound together now, whether you like it or not." Tears spilled down my cheeks. I hated that he was right, hated how relief flooded through me at his touch, at his presence. "I hate you," I whispered. "I know." He wiped my tears with his thumb. "But you also need me, and soon you'll stop fighting what we both know is inevitable." He pulled me against his chest, and I let myself take comfort in the solid warmth of him, in the steady beat of his heart beneath my ear. His hand stroked my hair with a tenderness that made my chest ache. "No more escape attempts," he murmured against my hair. "No more defiance. You're mine, Isabella. The sooner you accept that, the easier this will be." I should have pulled away, should have maintained some shred of resistance. But the isolation had stripped away my defenses, left me raw and desperate for human connection. "I accept it," I heard myself say. "I'm yours." His arms tightened around me. Good girl. The weeks that followed were different. I was different. Something had shifted during those 7 days alone. The fight had gone out of me, replaced by a strange sort of surrender. I stopped thinking about escape, stopped looking for opportunities to run. Instead, I focused on the work, on the baby growing inside me, on the strange domestic rhythm of my life with Luca. At 24 weeks pregnant, I could feel the baby moving regularly now, little flutters and kicks that Luca insisted on feeling whenever they happened. He'd place his hand on my growing belly, wonder softening his usually hard features, and murmur to our child in Italian. "What are you saying?" I asked one evening as we sat in his study, my feet propped on an ottoman while he worked at his desk. He looked up, a slight smile playing at his lips. "I'm telling her that she's going to be loved, protected, that she'll want for nothing." "Her?" I placed my hand over my stomach. "You think it's a girl?" "I know it's a girl." His certainty was absolute, the way it was about everything. "My daughter, our daughter." The possessiveness in those words should have bothered me. Instead, it felt like safety. Professor Alessi had me working on my most ambitious project yet. A complete letter collection supposedly written by Artemisia Gentileschi, the Baroque painter, discussing her techniques and experiences as a woman artist in the 17th century. The work was exquisite, demanding, and utterly absorbing. "You've surpassed even my expectations," the professor said one afternoon, examining my latest letter under magnification. "These are flawless. The aging, the ink, the handwriting. I would stake my reputation on their authenticity. The pride I felt was genuine. I'd become exactly what Luca had promised. An artist, a craftsperson, a keeper of false histories that felt more true than truth. That night, Luca invited me to dinner in his private quarters, rooms I'd never been permitted to enter before. The space was surprisingly intimate, less formal than the rest of the mansion. A small dining table near windows overlooking the gardens, comfortable furniture, shelves lined with books in multiple languages. "Thank you for joining me," he said, pulling out my chair with old-world courtesy. "Did I have a choice?" I asked, though without the edge the question would have held months ago. "You always have choices, Isabella. You've simply learned to make the right ones." Dinner was prepared by his personal chef. Delicate pasta, perfectly grilled fish, vegetables that tasted like they'd been picked that afternoon. We talked about art, about the Artemisia letters, about baby names. The conversation flowed easily, naturally, like we were actually a couple instead of captor and captive. After dinner, Luca poured himself wine and brought me sparkling water with lemon. We sat on the couch near the fireplace, close enough that our legs touched. "I need to tell you something," he said, his voice uncharacteristically uncertain. I turned to face him, surprised by the vulnerability in his expression. "What is it?" He was silent for a long moment, his fingers tracing patterns on my wrist. "When I first saw you at the auction, serving drinks and trying to be invisible, I wanted you immediately. Not just physically, though that was part of it. I wanted to possess you, to take something beautiful and unclaimed and make it mine." "I know," I said quietly. "You've made that clear." "But what I didn't expect," he continued, his eyes meeting mine, "was that possessing you wouldn't be enough. That I would want more than your obedience, more than your body. That I would want you to choose me." My breath caught. "Luca, I love you, Isabella." The words fell between us like stones into still water. "I love you in ways I didn't think I was capable of. I'm obsessed with you. I need you. And it terrifies me because I don't know how to do this. How to love someone without destroying them, without consuming them completely." I stared at him, my mind reeling. Luca Demir, the man who controlled everything, who showed no weakness, was confessing love with the same intensity he brought to everything else. "You've controlled me," I whispered. "Isolated me, kept me prisoner." "I know." His hand tightened on my wrist. "And I'd do it again because the alternative, losing you, letting you go, is unthinkable. I'm not a good man, Isabella. I never pretended to be. But I'm yours, as completely as you're mine." The confession should have changed everything. Instead, it crystallized what I'd been trying to deny for months. I loved him too. Not the healthy, wholesome love of romance novels, but something darker, more complicated. Love twisted with need, resentment tangled with desire. I loved the man who'd imprisoned me, who'd molded me into something new, who'd given me purpose and protection, and a strange sort of freedom within my captivity. "I don't know if what I feel is love," I admitted, my voice shaking. "Or Stockholm Syndrome. Or just survival instinct. Does it matter?" He pulled me closer, his hand cradling my face. "We're bound together now. By contract, by the baby, by everything we've become to each other. Call it what you want. But it's real." He kissed me then, and this time I didn't hold back. I kissed him with all the pent-up need and confusion and desperate hunger that had been building for months. His hands found my body, careful of my growing belly but no less possessive. "Come to bed with me," he murmured against my lips. No more separate rooms. No more distance between us. "Luca, I'm not asking for sex. Not until you're ready. Until you're certain." His forehead rested against mine. "I just want you in my bed. I want to fall asleep with you in my arms and wake up with you beside me. Let me have that, Isabella. Please." The please undid me. Luca never said please, never asked when he could command. The vulnerability in that single word made my decision. "Okay," I whispered. "Yes." His bedroom was dominated by a massive bed draped in dark gray linens. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the gardens, currently shrouded in darkness. He gave me one of his shirts to sleep in, soft cotton that smelled like him, and watched as I changed in his bathroom. When I emerged, he was already in bed, the covers pulled back in invitation. I slid in beside him, and immediately his arms came around me, pulling me against his chest, my back to his front, his hand splayed protectively over my belly where our daughter grew. "Thank you," he murmured into my hair. We lay in silence for a while, the only sound our breathing gradually synchronizing. "Luca," I said softly, "why did you really choose me? Out of everyone you could have found." His hand tightened on my stomach. "Because I saw myself in you. That night at the auction, serving drinks to criminals and trying to be invisible, you reminded me of who I was before I became this." He paused. "My father was a forger, one of the best. He taught me everything before he was murdered by a competitor when I was 19. I took over his operation, expanded it, became more ruthless than he ever was. But I lost the art in the process, the craft, the love of creation. I turned in his arms to face him. And you thought I could give that back to you. I thought you could become what I used to be, an artist who happened to work in deception rather than truth." His fingers traced my face. "But you became something more. You became necessary. I'm pregnant with your child. Of course I'm necessary. You were necessary before that." His eyes held mine. "You're the only person who's ever seen both sides of me, the criminal and the artist, the monster and the man. And you haven't run. Even when you tried to escape, you came back. You always come back. Because I have no choice. You have every choice." His voice was fierce. "You could have fought harder, could have found a way. But some part of you wants this, wants me. Admit it, Isabella." I looked at him. Really looked at him. At the man who'd claimed me with a kiss, who'd imprisoned me in luxury, who'd taught me to create beautiful lies and loved me in ways that terrified us both. "I want this," I whispered. "God help me. I want you. I don't know if it's real, or if you've just broken me until I can't tell the difference anymore. But yes, I want this." His kiss was gentle this time, reverent. And when we finally fell asleep wrapped around each other, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Peace. I woke to chaos, shouting, breaking glass, the sharp crack of gunfire. Luca was already out of bed, pulling on pants, grabbing a gun from a drawer I hadn't known existed. "Stay here," he ordered, his voice deadly calm despite the violence erupting somewhere in the house. "Lock the door. Don't open it for anyone but me." "What's happening?" "Rivals." He checked the gun's chamber. "They've come for leverage. You. Stay hidden." He was gone before I could respond, the door clicking shut behind him. I locked it with shaking hands, then retreated to the bathroom. The most interior room, no windows. I could hear more gunfire, closer now. Shouting in Italian and other languages I didn't recognize. Then footsteps in the bedroom. "Isabella Rossini." A man's voice, accented and cold. "We know you're here. Come out, and no one else needs to die." I pressed my hand over my mouth, trying to breathe silently. My heart hammered so hard I thought it might give me away. The bathroom door exploded inward. 2 men entered, guns drawn. One grabbed me, dragging me out despite my struggles. I saw Luca's bedroom destroyed. Overturned furniture, broken glass, blood on the pristine carpet. "The boss will be pleased," one man said in heavily accented English. "Demir's pregnant whore, perfect leverage." They forced me down the stairs, through the mansion's corridors. I saw bodies, Dimitri, bleeding but alive. Other guards I recognized, not moving. The destruction was surgical, targeted. In the grand foyer, a man waited. Older, 60s maybe, with silver hair and eyes like chips of ice. "Ms. Rossini," he said pleasantly, as if we were meeting at a cocktail party. I'm Alexander Volkov. I believe Luka has mentioned me. He had. Volkov was his biggest competitor, ruthless and patient. They'd been circling each other for years, neither quite willing to start an open war, until now. What do you want? I managed to ask. What I've always wanted. Demir's empire, his contacts, his forgery operation. Volkov smiled. And now, thanks to you, I have the leverage to take it all. They held me in a warehouse on the outskirts of Milan. Concrete floors, exposed beams, the smell of old machinery and fear. My hands were zip-tied in front of me, my swollen belly making it impossible to find a comfortable position on the metal chair they'd placed me in. Volkov had left after delivering his ultimatum. Luka would surrender his entire operation, every contact, every authentication expert, every piece of his carefully constructed empire, or I would die. He had 48 hours to decide. He won't give it up, I told the guard watching me, a younger man who at least had the decency to look uncomfortable about holding a pregnant woman hostage. You don't know him. He'll burn everything down before surrendering. The guard said nothing, but something in his expression told me I was right. I'd been there for 6 hours when I felt the first contraction. Not labor, too early for that at 25 weeks, but stress contractions that Dr. Marchesi had warned me about. I breathed through it, trying to stay calm for the baby's sake. The second contraction came 10 minutes later, stronger. Something's wrong, I said to the guard. The baby. I need a doctor. He looked uncertain, reaching for his radio. Before he could speak into it, the lights went out. What followed was chaos painted in darkness and muzzle flashes. Gunfire erupted from multiple directions. I threw myself to the floor as best I could with my bound hands and pregnant belly covering my head. Shouting in Russian, then Italian, then screams. The emergency lights flickered on, casting everything in hellish red. Through the haze of gunpowder smoke, I saw Luka. He moved through Volkov's men like death incarnate. No hesitation, no mercy. He killed with brutal efficiency. Headshots, center mass, throats cut with a knife I hadn't seen him draw. His white shirt was splattered with blood that wasn't his. His face was a mask of cold fury I'd never seen before. This was who he really was. Not the sophisticated art dealer or the patient seducer. This was the monster underneath, unleashed. He reached me in seconds, cutting my zip ties with the same knife that had just taken 3 lives. Can you walk? Contractions, I gasped. The baby. His expression shifted, fear breaking through the cold fury. He scooped me into his arms with surprising gentleness given the violence he'd just committed. Dmitri, clear the exit, now. I saw Dmitri then, also covered in blood, his face grim as he and 3 other men created a path through the chaos. More gunfire, more bodies falling. Luka carried me through it all, his arms steady despite everything. Outside, a fleet of black SUVs waited. Luka placed me in the back of one, barking orders in rapid Italian. Dr. Marchesi appeared from another vehicle, his medical bag already open. How many contractions? He asked, his hands moving over my belly with professional efficiency. 3, maybe 4. I winced as another one hit. We need to get her to a hospital, Dr. Marchesi said to Luka. The stress could trigger premature labor. No hospitals. Luka's voice was absolute. Too exposed. Volkov has people everywhere. Then I'll need proper facilities. Your home is compromised. Luka pulled out his phone, made a call. We go to the secondary location. It's equipped for medical emergencies. The secondary location turned out to be another mansion, smaller than Luka's primary residence but no less secure. Dr. Marchesi set up a makeshift examination room while Luka hovered, still covered in blood, his usual control fraying at the edges. You need to calm down, I told him as another contraction hit. Your stress is making this worse. I almost lost you." His voice was raw. "I almost lost both of you." Dr. Marchesi administered medication to stop the contractions, hooking me up to monitors that beeped reassuringly. "The baby's heart rate is strong," he said, "but Ms. Rossini needs complete bed rest for at least 2 weeks. No stress, no excitement." Luca laughed, a bitter sound. "We're in the middle of a war. Volkov won't stop because she's on bed rest." "Then end the war." I reached for his hand, sticky with drying blood. "Please, for her, for us." His eyes met mine, and I saw the calculation there, the weighing of options, of costs and consequences. "I'll end it," he said quietly. "Tonight." What Luca did that night, I learned later in pieces. Dmitri told me some of it. News reports filled in the rest. The official story blamed a gas leak at a warehouse owned by a Russian import company. The truth was that Luca had burned half of Volkov's operations in Milan: warehouses, safe houses, legitimate fronts. He'd systematically destroyed every piece of the old Russians' empire in the city, leaving no room for retaliation. And Volkov himself had disappeared. No body was ever found, but everyone in their world knew what had happened. You didn't cross Luca Demir and survive, not when you'd threatened what was his. The violence brought attention Luca couldn't deflect. Interpol opened an investigation. Italian authorities, even those on his payroll, were forced to act. Within 2 weeks of the warehouse rescue, Luca was arrested on charges ranging from money laundering to conspiracy to commit murder. I watched from the window of the secondary mansion as they took him away in handcuffs. He looked up at me, our eyes meeting across the distance. Even cuffed, even surrounded by police, he looked utterly in control. His lawyer visited me that afternoon, a severe woman named Signora Benedetti, who'd clearly been prepared for this contingency. "Mr. Demir has instructed me to ensure your continued safety and comfort," she said, spreading documents across the dining table. "This mansion is yours for as long as you need it. Your bank account has been activated. You have access to all funds from your work. Additionally, Mr. Demir has established a trust for the child." I stared at the numbers. Millions. Enough to live comfortably for the rest of my life. "The contract?" I asked. "Our 5-year agreement?" "Void, given the circumstances." Signora Benedetti's expression was professionally neutral. "You're free to go wherever you wish, Ms. Rossini. Mr. Demir has no further claim on you." Free. After months of captivity, I was finally free. The irony was that I had nowhere to go, no one to go to. My old life was gone. This strange new existence Luca had created was all I had. "When will he be sentenced?" I asked. "The trial will likely take months. Best case scenario, he'll receive 10 years. Worst case." She didn't finish, but I understood. Life in prison. Or execution, depending on what they could prove. Our daughter was born in April, 3 weeks early but healthy. I named her Sophia, after Luca's mother. She had his dark hair, his intense gaze, already her father's daughter at just hours old. I had her baptized at a small church, with only Dmitri and Signora Caruso in attendance. No family, because I had none. No friends, because I'd lost them all to Luca's isolation. Just me, and this perfect tiny life that was half mine and half monster. The trial concluded when Sophia was 4 months old. 15 years. Luca showed no emotion as the sentence was read, but his eyes found mine in the gallery. I'd attended every day, unable to stay away even though seeing him in chains broke something in me each time. After the sentencing, they allowed me a brief visit. We sat across from each other in a sterile room, a guard watching from the corner. Luca wore prison orange that somehow still looked tailored on him. His hair was slightly longer, his face thinner, but his eyes held the same intensity. "You came," he said, "every day." I pulled out my phone, showing him photos of Sophia. She has your eyes. His hand pressed against the glass partition separating us, and I matched it from my side. You should leave Italy, he said quietly. Start over somewhere new. Give her a normal life. I tried. I'd tried several times over the past months. Looked at apartments in Paris, London, even considered the States. I can't seem to make myself go. Isabella, I'm waiting for you. The words came out stronger than I felt. However long it takes. I'm waiting. Something vulnerable crossed his face. 15 years. You'll be 41 when I get out. Sophia will be a teenager. You can't waste your life waiting for a man in prison. You already took 5 years of my life, I said. What's 15 more? He laughed, the sound broken. You're insane. You made me this way. I pressed my hand harder against the glass. You took a frightened girl and molded her into someone who could survive anything, who could create beauty from lies, who could love a monster. So yes, I'm waiting. Sophia deserves to know her father. And I took a breath. I can't imagine my life without you in it. I love you, he said, his voice rough with emotion. God help us both, but I love you. I know. Tears spilled down my cheeks. I love you too. That's why I'm waiting. The years passed slowly. I raised Sophia alone, teaching her Italian and English, letting her visit her father once a month in the sterile visiting room. I took over the forgery operation, working from the mansion with Professor Alessi's guidance. My work was exquisite, better than Luca's had ever been, if the professor was to be believed. I laundered money through a legitimate auction house I established in Milan, dealing in authenticated antiquities that I sometimes created myself. The business was wildly successful. Within 5 years, I was one of the most respected art dealers in Europe. No one knew the owner of Rossini Auctions was also its best forger. Sophia grew up surrounded by art and history and carefully curated lies. She was brilliant, sharp as her father, with my artistic talent and his ruthless focus. By 7, she could spot a forgery at 50 paces. By 10, she was learning the craft herself. Luca got early release after 12 years for good behavior. I was 37 when I picked him up from prison, Sophia beside me in the back of the car. He looked older, gray threading his dark hair, lines around his eyes that hadn't been there before. But when those smoke-gray eyes met mine, the intensity was unchanged. Isabella. My name in his voice after years of phone calls through prison systems. Welcome home, I said. He slid into the car, and immediately Sophia launched herself at him. Papa! He caught her, his arms wrapping around this child he'd barely known, and I saw tears in his eyes for the first time. That night, after Sophia was asleep, Luca and I stood in the garden of the mansion I'd kept for him. 12 years had passed. We were different people, marked by time and separation. I don't expect anything, he said quietly. You've built a life. I won't disrupt it. In answer, I pulled him down and kissed him. The same possessive, hungry kiss he'd given me that first night at the auction. His hands found my waist, pulling me against him with the same desperate need. You're mine, I whispered against his lips. You made me yours 12 years ago. Nothing's changed. Everything's changed. Nothing that matters. I took his hand, leading him toward the house. Come to bed, Luca. Come home. We rebuilt the empire together, legitimate this time. Rossini Auctions expanded across Europe, dealing in real antiquities and carefully placed forgeries that no one could ever prove weren't authentic. Luca's contacts, combined with my reputation, made us unstoppable. Sophia learned the family business, understanding from an early age the delicate dance between truth and deception. By 15, she was creating her own forgeries. By 18, she was better than either of us. On our daughter's 21st birthday, Luca and I stood in the garden where we'd reunited, watching her celebrate with the carefully curated friends we'd approved, She was brilliant, beautiful, and absolutely her father's daughter. "We created something remarkable," Luca said, his arm around my waist in that possessive hold I'd never stopped craving. "We created a lot of things," I corrected. "A daughter, an empire, a dynasty built on lies that feel more true than truth." He turned me to face him, his hands framing my face the way they had that first night. "And you. I created you. Took a frightened girl and made her into this." "No." I met his eyes steadily. "We created each other. You needed an artist. I needed a monster. We found both in each other." He kissed me, possessive and hungry, and eternally certain. After all these years, his kisses still felt like claiming, still felt like coming home. "Regrets?" he asked against my lips. I thought about that night at the auction, the desperate girl I'd been, the woman I'd become, forger, mother, queen of an empire built on beautiful lies. I thought about the violence and the captivity, the isolation and the surrender, about loving a man who'd imprisoned me, who'd molded me, who'd loved me in ways that destroyed and created in equal measure. "None," I whispered. "Not a single one." Because the truth was, I didn't want to be saved, didn't want to be free of the chains Luca had wrapped around both of us. Our love was born from violence and obsession and darkness, and I wouldn't have it any other way.